many of you are not all right this afternoon, so that's okay. That's understandable. And before I get started, I would like to give credit to the real leadership that brought me here today, because you see, you have leadership that's only there doing high-profile cases, that are chasing the cameras and basically hounding for the microphones and all of that. That's not that type of leadership. This type of leadership that we have here in Charleston are people who are there for the average Joes and the average Janes who the television cameras don't always pay attention to. So I'd like to hear some applause for the real leadership that we have in the city of Charleston. Now, I'm a historian by profession, and that's important because you have to understand how things got to be the way they are before you can fix them. Because before a doctor can find a solution and cure for a sickness, he has to trace the roots of that malady. And so I'm just going to briefly do that, not take up a whole lot of your time by explaining a little something that most people do not know. You see, 500 years ago, there was no such thing on this human planet as race. People did not see themselves as such. You saw yourself as either a Frenchman or an Englishman or a German if you were in Europe. You saw yourself as a Fulani or an Igbo or a Mandingo in Africa. You saw yourself as someone from China, India, or Japan in Asia, or you saw yourself as a Cherokee or a Mohawk or whatever in this particular continent in which we live. But during the time that this continent was being explored, they needed labor to work the land. They tried the American Indian at first. The American Indian was not able to survive the diseases brought over. So therefore, there was a man by the name of Father Bartholomew de Casa, who came with Columbus on his third voyage. He said that instead of enslaving the Indian, let us use the people of Africa. And therefore, that's how we wound up over here. Now, having said that, in order to get people to go along with this type of thing, a few things had to be done. First, there were a group of Europeans here called the indentured servants who were brought over here who had to work the land. But the plantation owners of this country realized something. These white indentured servants and these black slaves were getting way too chummy. But so they had to stop that, because they understood if these black slaves, if these white indentured servants ever realized how much they had in common, that would be the end of the plantation system in these United States. So they planted hatred in the seeds of the minds of the indentured servants. And therefore that encouraged racial violence that existed for over the last 400 years. Here in Charleston, you had not only the Denmark Vesey Revolt and the hanging of Vesey and his comrades, you had the Charleston race riots of 1876. People talk about Rosewood. You also had the Charleston race riot of 1919, where Isaac Doctor and William Brown were lynched right below Marion Square during that particular situation. So a lot of this was by design, to keep these people on both sides from coming together and changing the system within the society. And once you understand that, you begin to break down these barriers and make this come together as a reality. Well, let me share this with you before I yield this to the next speaker. I used to take children to Selma, Alabama, and Montgomery and Birmingham and all these places every year, so they could meet the people who were still alive in the civil rights movement, because by the time they become old, all of those people will no longer be here. Let me say this. We spoke with the Reverend at Holt Street Baptist Church. That was the church where Dr. King announced the bus boycott on December 5th, 1955. And the pastor, who was a little boy at the time, was there. One of the young people on the trip asked him, "Pastor, because of your experiences, do you hate white people?" And his response was this. He said, back in the 1960s, you had white people who were against us, like the Klan and the governor of Alabama. But you also had white people like Viola Yuzo and many others who came down from the north who were killed trying to help us. At the same time, you had blacks who were for us. But at the same time, you had African Americans who ran back to the Klan and ran back to the police and were secretly against us. So he made something that's clear that I want to make clear to all of you. He said, our struggle is not one of black versus white. It's about good versus evil. Thank you.